Somewhere in Africa, roughly 70,000 years ago, a woman is sitting alone at the edge of a dying fire. The rest of her group is asleep. The children are curled together for warmth. The men are breathing slowly in the dark. She should be sleeping too. But she isn't. She's looking up. Above her, the sky is doing something that no human alive today has ever truly seen. No light pollution, no cities on the horizon, no planes crossing overhead, just the black sky, the stars, and whatever fire they could keep alive. The Milky Way stretches from one end of the world to the other like a river of white fire, so dense with stars that the darkness between them seems almost wrong. She has seen this sky every single night of her life, but tonight, for reasons she cannot explain, she is really looking at it. And something is happening inside her mind that has never happened before in the entire history of our species. She is wondering, this moment, or one very much like it, may be the most important moment in all of human history. Not a battle, not an invention, not the founding of a civilization, just a woman, a dying fire, and a question forming in a human mind for the very first time. What is that? Paleoanthropologists call it the cognitive revolution. The moment, somewhere between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago, when the human brain crossed a threshold that no other brain on Earth had ever crossed. Before this moment, our ancestors were intelligent. They made tools. They used fire. They lived in social groups. By any measure of the animal kingdom, they were extraordinary, but they were not yet fully human. Not in the way that matters, because before the cognitive revolution, there is almost no evidence of abstract thought, no art, no ritual burial, no symbolic objects, no evidence that any human being had ever looked at the world and asked a question that had no practical survival answer. They ate, they hunted, they slept, they survived, and then suddenly everything changed. The earliest known art in human history was found in a cave in Sulawesi, Indonesia. It is a painting of a pig. Simple, red ochre on cave wall, painted roughly 45,500 years ago by a hand that shook slightly as it worked. You can see it in the brush strokes, but that shaking hand is everything, because that pig is not just a picture. It is proof that somewhere inside a human skull, 45,000 years ago, a mind looked at the world and decided that reality was not enough, that the pig needed to exist somewhere else too, on a wall, in paint, preserved beyond the moment. Why? Nobody knows. That is the terrifying and beautiful thing. The person who painted that pig left no explanation, no writing, no context, just the image itself, sitting in the dark of that cave for 45,000 years, waiting for another human mind to find it and feel something inexplicable looking back. We felt it. We still do. But go back further, long before the cave paintings, long before symbolic thought, back to the very beginning of the human story. 300,000 years ago, in what is now Morocco, a group of early Homo sapiens are doing something that will not be understood for nearly 3 centuries of modern science. They are burying their dead, not abandoning them, not leaving them for predators the way every other animal on Earth does. Burying them carefully, with intention, in specific positions, in specific places. Why? The only possible explanation, the one that every anthropologist eventually arrives at, is that these early humans believed something about death that no other creature on Earth had ever believed before, that it was not the end, that the person who died was still, in some sense, somewhere, that the body deserved to be treated with care because the person it had carried still mattered. This is the most extraordinary thought any mind has ever produced. Not mathematics, not philosophy, not science. The idea that the people we love continue to exist after we can no longer see them. Your ancestors believed this 300,000 years ago, standing over a grave in the red African dirt with their bare hands still covered in soil. And then there was the music. In 2008, archaeologists excavating a cave in southwestern Germany found a small bone flute carved from the wing bone of a vulture, roughly 40,000 years old. It still works. Researchers who reconstructed it found that it can play a full pentatonic scale, the same basic scale used in music traditions from ancient China to West Africa to medieval Europe. 40,000 years ago, a human being sat in a cave in Germany and played music. Not for survival, not for any practical purpose whatsoever. For the same reason humans make music today, because something inside them needed to come out, because the world was too large and too strange and too beautiful and too terrifying to simply exist inside without making some kind of sound in response to it. The same impulse that made Mozart, that made the blues, that made every song that has ever made you feel something you couldn't put into words. It was already there, fully formed, sitting in a bone flute in a German cave 40,000 years ago. Go back even further, 500,000 years ago. Not Homo sapiens yet, a different species, Homo heidelbergensis, our direct ancestors, living in what is now England, in a place archaeologists now call Boxgrove. They are hunting a rhinoceros, a group of them, working together, coordinating, communicating, through early language, gesture, or something we have no name for yet. They kill the animal, and then something happens that stops every archaeologist who studies this site cold. They don't just butcher it for food, they butcher it with extraordinary care, precise, deliberate cuts, evidence of a process that took hours longer than necessary to simply extract the meat. As if the killing mattered, as if the animal mattered, as if what they were doing required a kind of attention and respect that pure hunger would never demand. 500,000 years ago, long before art, long before ritual burial, long before any of the things we point to as evidence of human consciousness, something was already there. Something that looked at a dead animal and felt something beyond hunger. Something that would eventually look up at a night sky and wonder. Something that would bury its dead with bare hands. Something that would carve a flute from a vulture bone and play it alone in the dark. We spend a lot of time asking what makes us human. We point to language, to technology, to civilization, to science and art and law and philosophy. But all of those things are recent, fragile, built on top of something much older and much stranger. The real answer, the one that the fossil record keeps pointing back to, is not what we built. It is what we felt. Before we had words for it, before we had rituals for it, before we had any framework to hold it, we wondered, we grieved, we made things that had no survival purpose whatsoever, simply because the world demanded a response from us that went beyond eating and sleeping and staying alive. That is the thing that separated us from every other creature that has ever existed on this planet. Not our intelligence, our restlessness, the ancient, aching, completely irrational need to understand something that may never be understood. We do not know her name, the woman sitting at the dying fire 70,000 years ago, looking up at the Milky Way. We do not know what she thought. We do not know what question formed inside her mind as the coals went cold and the stars blazed above her in the absolute darkness of the ancient world. But we know she was there, because we are here. Every question you have ever asked about the sky, every piece of music that has ever broken your heart, every grave you have ever stood beside and refused to believe was the end. All of it began with her. A woman, a dying fire, a sky full of stars, and the first human thought that had no answer.